Garnes is the current president of the Ohio State Beekeepers Association. Peggy started keeping honeybees over 20 years ago and now manages well over 100 hives. In recent years, her focus has been on selectively breeding and producing Ohio queen stock. We'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Alvin said this one turns off. Turn off.
So you need yep.
Okay, so not yet. Now?
Yes.
Okay, now we're up. Okay, so thank you very much for inviting me, and it's nice listening to everybody. I know I'm not used to this one, I'm used to the little one that hangs on your shirt. But it's nice to listen to all the other speakers and hear everything that's getting validated. For me, like Ms. Anna introduced me, I've been keeping bees way long. I probably last maybe 5 years, I run about 140 hives. It'll go up to about 160 with splits, and I have promised to cut back, so I'm down to about 100, but we'll see. Plus, if you hide enough of them on the property, that no one really knows how many you have. So family can't get that mad. I guess you guys can relate to this. I am located between Cleveland and Columbus, about 45 minutes south of Lake Erie, so I catch a lot of the secondary snow. Same problems you guys have. So again, so this is really relevant. I spoke with Megan, so time-wise, you're probably maybe a week or so ahead of me. So I pretty much geared most of the slides for that. So talking today is what are we going to be discussing? I don't want to say I'm going to tell you because again, this should be discussion. If you have questions, stop me. It's easier to work on the slide while we're there. So what is an overwintered nuke? It's a small nucleus hive that is functioning on its own with that year's queen and all the prodigy that you developed through the summer, cared for it, it came out of winter. Okay, sounds reasonable? We're all agreeing with that? Again, how many people in here are, by raise of hands, 5 years or under? So maybe a third. Everybody else is on the other side of it. So again, with everybody in here, how many people have 2 hives or more? Okay, we've got both sides of this build. So if you have 2 hives or more, in my opinion, you can make an overwintered nuke. I brought some equipment that we're going to talk about a little bit later as we get to it, of what you need, in my opinion, to make an overwintered nuke. And again, how many people lost hives last year? Yeah, and this is a good reason to make an overwintered nuke. One, to replace the whatever your losses were. How many people had to buy bees last year? Okay, if you had made overwintered nukes, you wouldn't have to do that. A lot of times too, and it's not to annoy anybody in the audience, that every time we keep bringing new bees in, we're bringing in new pests and viruses. You know, our bees are trying to adapt to their own little biodome. Here in Michigan, here in Ohio, every time you bring new stuff in, it's like us being introduced to COVID. We're used to the flu, we're used to our regular stuff that runs around in the fall. You throw COVID in there and we're not ready for it. There's a lot of problems. The other one is, when do you start? I always start mine, when I do my graphs for my overwintered nukes, I graph right before I leave for EAS. That's always somewhere like the end of July, so that when I get back from EAS, those cells are ready to go into the nukes. I'm going to split down any hives that have struggled during the year. You always have those hives that are, doesn't matter what you do to them. You've tried to requeen them, you've fed them, you've treated them, they just struggle. Those are going to be your donor hives for when you make your overwintered nukes. Get rid of them then, rather than fighting with them all the way through the rest of the summer. And the how to do it with the equipment and the timing and the care, we're going to cover all of that. So, when do the bees think about getting ready to overwinter themselves? Their nuke, when they create nukes, that's their swarm. Think about that. They're taking their bees, queen setting up a new little spot, that's their overwintered nuke. So after the summer solstice, those queens, the physiology part of them, they're a little bit different. They're geared to really rush to build up. So if you're going to be thinking about making queens ahead of time for your overwintered nukes, wait till after that summer solstice. Does that make sense? Because otherwise, that queen is, she's just regular, in my opinion, just regular. So the next one is, I'm used to looking that way, maybe I'll come on this side. A little bit of a walker. So we're all looking at the same thing. So anyway, I start mine, like I said, in July, and that's when I start looking for no mites. I don't want any mites. My threshold, and I know this goes against some of the other stuff that we promote and we have as literature, 1 mite. I'm doing something right then. It's like if you have dogs or cats. If you find 1 flea, do you wait until you find 3 or 4? No. You treat right away. You make arrangements right away. Because they're gonna, just like mites, respond exponentially. Do you guys know how to, do you guys do Nosema squishes? Yeah, do you do it as a group at these conferences? That might be a fun thing for next spring, is people bring 5 bees that died over the winter, set up a lab, do the squishes, and then look and see what Nosema looks like. And that might be helping you guys overwinter things better. Queens or cells, how many people in here graft? Well, you got a bunch of grafters. Yes. So those, not only can they graft and produce the queens, they can also produce queen cells. And that's one of the things we'll talk about here too. Do you need a queen? A mated queen? Can you use a virgin queen? Can you use a queen cell? What you're gonna need to get started with is 2 frames of capped brood, 1 frame of open nectar and pollen, and 2 frames of foundation to start in July. End of July-ish, middle of July probably for you guys here. The reason that you have to have 2 hives, remember we talked about that earlier, how many people have 2 hives you can make overwintered nukes? Because you're gonna take 2 frames of dark capped brood from 1 hive to start the 1 nuke. I like to use the buddy system where they are bumped together so they share a common heat wall. So you need to take 2 more frames of dark capped brood. If you only have 1 hive, taking 4 frames of dark capped brood could be a problem. Because if you go into drought then, or dearth, whatever you want to call it, that would be a little bit more stress on the hive. But if you're only taking 2 frames of dark capped brood from 1 hive, they're not going to skip a beat, other than they're going to go, oh man, we need more kids. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about. One of the things I want you to notice as we go through this talk, what color are those hives?
White.
White, okay, we have 1 colorblind person. At the last presentation, sometimes when things are painted white, they're a little bit more of a beacon to, double dairy on a Friday night, the kids. Or a lot of times when the guys are commercial, they're running from California, then they're hitting Georgia, then they're moving over to Florida and then heading up the coast. What's the temperatures down there? Those bees are staying in warmer weather. Okay, let's think about how warm is it outside today? I checked my phone and in Claire it was supposed to be 52. Boop, you're a degree lower than me at my house. So again, we can't add heat to our hives, correct? We can wrap them, we're gonna talk about that, but we can't add heat. They can ventilate on their own. The guys that are doing migratory stuff, they can't, it's harder for them to cool the hives, so paint them white, reflect that heat. We shouldn't be doing that here up north with our girls. So overwintering nukes. Again, we're gonna take 2 frames dark capped brood with the bees that are on them. 1 frame of open nectar and pollen, 2 frames of foundation. I have used everything from a queen cell to a virgin queen to a mated queen, doesn't matter. If you were gonna use a queen cell, the day before she's due to come out is when you're gonna introduce that. And you're gonna put it in a cell protector. Because sometimes that queen cell is going in a hive that is not sister, half sister. And if you remember back to the early biology days when you took classes, if it is not from their genetics, they're gonna try and tear it down. All right, the reason for the dark cap brood is because there is no eggs or larvae on that frame. They have no resource to make themselves a queen. So they're gonna be ready for you to give them whatever they can to have a queen. All right, does that make sense? The other thing too is the open frame of food. Somebody asked me one time, well, why can't you just do more foundation or just give them an extra frame of bees? Well, let's think about it. When you take those 2 frames of dark cap brood and the adhering bees, are there any foragers? No. You're not bringing any guard bees either. They have nothing to eat. They've never been out of the hive. So you want them to stay as nurse bees to take care of that emerging queen, take care of that emerging brood. So you want them to stay as nurse bees. So if you give them the food, they don't have to go out, right? Okay, so the other thing too on a virgin queen, I know that's like the new thing now is to buy a virgin queen and pay like $30 instead of what are queens up here now, 50, 45, 50, 60. I mean, that's crazy. That's another story. That's a different talk. But with the virgin queens, the only hiccup I have found with that, virgin queens, when they emerge, they have to be fed immediately. You have a very small window of just a couple hours before they're gonna start to be compromised and sometimes die. So they're gonna have to get banked. So now you've only got maybe a 2-week window from the time that they emerge. I found after 2 weeks, they don't do well being introduced. For me, if I use a virgin queen in the back, when I pull out the queen out of here to be sold, that I will, while they're thinking about it, while I'm catching her, marking her, putting her in a cage, sticking her in a pocket, I will take the virgin queen that's emerged within, like, say, the last 12 hours, I just drop her in the back corner. Yep, don't do anything else. Don't spray them, don't dip them in honey, don't anything. Because everybody's all focused on where'd the queen go. You're not putting her in the front, so she's not being looked at as somebody trying to challenge the hive. And by the time you drop her in the back of the box and she crawls down there and walks around, they're gonna realize the old queen's gone. Hey, we don't even have to build one. Here's a new girl already. Makes it easier. If you're gonna use a mated queen, get it local. Again, because those queens have already been raised in this biodome. They already know what to be doing, hopefully, right? So anyway, since it's so nice and not quite this snowy yet, but these are the things that we wanna be thinking about now, before you're gonna be doing your overwintered nukes for next year. You're gonna pick stock. You gotta think about nutrition, because again, if you don't have good, fat, healthy bees raising these queens up, you're not gonna get big queens. We had talked earlier at one of the meetings about the comb, either clean comb or newer wax. The reason I say that is that how many times have you bought a nuke from someplace and you look at the comb and it's like, ooh, I wouldn't even put that on my shoes, that it's so dark and terrible. This is where your bees are gonna raise the next generation. We know how liquid wax is, that it collects everything. If it's that black, what do you think is in it? Oh, that would be a good assay. What's in that? Now is a good time too, is to get either you have to buy your stuff or scrape around in the bee yard or in the equipment barn, find what you have. We're gonna talk about, I got all that stuff over here. Ideally what you should be using to go with. The last thing on it, get rid of all the mites and disease between now and spring. You should be in a good brood break about now, so you can do a dribble, right, if it's 40 degrees. I think University of Minnesota, don't they do dribbles at 40? Yeah, doesn't matter what the night temperature. If you're going to 40 during the day, hit them. You can vaporize them. I think the downside with vaporizing, I had one friend that this time of the year, they were doing that slide the pan thing in, and when they pulled it out, guess who was on the pan? Oh, that would have been the queen, kind of like sideways. What are the chances? But again, this time of the year, you fry that queen, literally, you're not doing good. Disease-free, if you don't have mites, you're not gonna have virus, right? And then pest-free. Do you guys get to overwinter your small hive beetles up here? How many people have small hive beetles? Yeah, the ones in Ohio have figured out how to overwinter in the cluster. It's like, darn, yeah. So anyway, so that's what we need to be thinking about now. For me, I judge all my queens on 5 criteria. 1, they have to overwinter. We can't make nukes in the spring if you've got a dead hive, right? So that's the first kick out the bucket. The second is because, believe it or not, I'm allergic to honeybees, so I have to carry an EpiPen. So those girls in my yard better be darn gentle. And, you know, if I'm gonna get stung or something, usually it's my own fault, and I've learned over the long-term years is don't pinch them. And my husband has learned don't hit the hive with the lawnmower. But again, they need to be gentle. And again, we all know that's a queen trait. So if you got a problem with that hive, get rid of her, because not only are you getting rid of her, but you're getting those drones out of the air. Because isn't that the direct replica of her? We don't want that either. My third thing is mite loads. I am very, I want to say proactive. I think we need to get better bees. It doesn't matter where we're at. The bees that a lot of times that are used in heavy pollination contracts, they're bred for pollination. They're bred to be working all year round. If you look outside now, we've got nothing coming in, like from now till March, pretty much. You're in the same food chain thing as I am. So again, if you can select for bees that, one, are gentle, know how to set themselves up for winter, are mite hygienic, that would help. One, so it's gonna be reducing the amount of chemicals that we're putting in the hive that get stuck in the wax. And if we do have to treat, we don't have to use really harsher chemicals. We can pretty much stay with the softer stuff. A good brood pattern, obviously. And the last thing on my list is honey production. Seems like the older I get, this is a sticky byproduct. With the amount of hives that I run, even though I still am in queen production, we'll still pull usually 3,000 to 5,000 pounds a year. That's a lot of sticky stuff to deal with. I have a friend in Western Ohio, he runs 200 hives. So 60 more than I do on a good year. He's pulling in 25,000 pounds of honey. I can't even wrap my head around that. You know how many 5-gallon buckets that would be? I would be like banished to the honey house for sure. So anyway, so let's get ready now to get what we need to talk about with equipment. You want to have a couple extra deep 5-frame boxes, a couple mediums. How many people in here are doing the all medium thing? See, I'm old school, still deeps. Because you may have to have honey to put on that little box going into winter. All right, so have your production hives, make a couple extra boxes. It's easier to steal from the big ones to give to the little ones. So get all your stuff built and put together now. Think about if you're gonna need any wrapping or anything from those fancy black cardboard boxes from Mail Lake, or just regular cardboard, because you can't find anything else. And then again, pick the hives. These are some of my Russian girls. So looking at this one, these are all the same age queens. They're in the same location, same water, everything else. So this is one is kind of like, she's got 2 deeps and a honey super. Notice not that much activity. This one, 2 deeps, 2 honey supers. Could be a contender. Look at this one, she's got problems. 3 deeps, honey super, have to ventilate the top, they're hanging out the side. Okay, we're grafting queens from her, right? Because that's the one, that's what we want. What are we gonna do with this one? That's gonna be your drone production, right? Because if you're not mating with your queens, everybody in the neighborhood, don't you want their girls mating with that? Oh yeah. So again, pick your stock. Russians are pretty much chewers. They don't like mites at all. Think about it, they've dealt with mites 150 some years. They're very hygienic. every once in a while, we'll talk about this too, is add in a different queen. You know, pay that $60 or 45, whatever it is, and bring in a little different genetics into your yard so we don't get bottled up too much. So, let's talk about that way. Talk about real quick on equipment. And I'm gonna leave this up here so you can look at it. We can thank my husband, that's why these boxes look so nice. They got painted just recently. We'll start from the bottom and work our way up. What I prefer is a solid bottom now, all right? They can ventilate themselves. If you have to add more airflow, that you can do, but in the fall when our nights drop to 40s, days only go to 50, if you have a screen bottom, that's still gonna be a little bit too much of an air rush for them to be building up. What I've done is, because again, I'm old school, and I run 10 framers, and I already had a bunch of 5-frame nuke boxes, I took 2 nuke boxes down to my Amish guy, and because I help him with queens and doing better with his stuff, he very happily filled this. So again, it's a solid one. We're gonna notice too that I'm gonna tell you, don't put them directly on the ground. You're also gonna need a spacer in case you have to feed candy board. And all this is a 1x1 with a hole drilled in it. If you were gonna do it now, I have changed all mine to 2x2. Go to the scrap wood part at the big box stores, and you can get them for 75% off the wood. You're chopping them up, glue it, screw it, paint it. All right, as far as for lids, you can come up and feel these. These are made out of 2x10, and they fit on the boxes. I'll put that on in just a minute. And they're painted flat black. I prime them first, and I flat black them. Again, the more solar gain that we can get for them, the better. All right, plus as heavy as this is, it's not blowing off, so you don't have to have all the extra bricks. I probably could build a small house in my yard with all the bricks that I've collected over the time. Here's how it gets set up. When they're sharing a common wall, when you're first setting up your nuke in summer, in July, your inside frame is gonna be capped honey, all right? Then you're gonna have your 2 frames of what? Dark cap brood, right? And then you're gonna have 2 frames of foundation. Your queen cell is going to be suspended in the center of the dark cap brood in a cell protector. I like the yellow ones because it has like 2 little wings. The red ones have 1 little set of wings, so you're gonna have to stab it into the side, and I hate to kill any brood, it just kills me. So anyway, so that's how you're gonna start it, all right? You're gonna start 2 of them. So then, when you go to put them together, this brood is gonna have been moved over. So now, you're gonna have just an open frame of food, brood, and then more foundation when you put the next box on top. Does that make sense? That looks confusing. Okay, so when we start it, it's gonna be capped honey, brood, queen cell, brood, foundation, foundation. You're gonna put a half a pollen patty on it, doesn't matter what kind. Put the inner cover on it, hole facing down, and then on top of the inner cover, you are gonna put your feed jar. When you are starting in July, it's gonna be a 1-to-1 solution. It can be a little bit less, like a 40% sugar, 60% water, so it mimics more a nectar flow. They're gonna pull wax faster that way, all right? Even though they're smarter than we think, sometimes they're not so smart. We can fool them. I like to put in either, am I allowed to say products? Yeah, Honeybee Healthy or Pro Health, something like that. 1, because I think it smells nice. And 2, if everything in the yard smells the same, you're not gonna have robbing going on. That makes sense? These are little hives. And then again, so this one gets put on, it's starting like that. You're gonna have your other box next to it.
And that boxes identical, just, opposite pattern?
Correct, well, you're gonna have the brood is gonna stay towards the common wall, because that's where they're gonna share heat. Then you're gonna put that pollen patty towards the back on each one, inner cover, feed jar, and then I'm gonna tell you to make sure you buy 2 extra boxes, because I didn't bring an inner cover, my bad. So you're gonna have this box on top to protect the feed jar. Because I don't know about you guys, but it's like in August, I'm feeding all the neighborhood yellow jackets. Yeah, it's just crazy. So anyway, so this is gonna go on top. As soon as they build out to that 4th frame of foundation, and they're starting to work on number 5, you're gonna take these 2 boxes off, the inner cover off, and you're gonna put frames in again. All right, you're gonna take 1 frame from the bottom box that has eggs and larvae, and it's going on that inside wall. So the bottom box from the inside wall is gonna be food, brood, 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 working on foundation. You're gonna take 1 frame to move up on top with eggs and larvae, and then foundation, foundation, foundation. The reason for that is because you guys know this, that the bees hate to have babies next to foundation. They're gonna build it up really, really fast. Again, put the half a pollen patty on top, inner cover, put your feed jar. Normally for me, in the summer, when I'm getting these started, I crank down the holes for the boxes. I use a piece of wood. They get 1 inch, that's all they get. And they get that all the time, for the rest of the summer, building up. Again, when you're starting these are just little hives. They don't have a lot of guard bees. You don't want that hive wasting its energy guarding a complete open entrance. Does that make sense? If you think about it, if they were in a tree, they got like 3 inches, that's it. 3 inches by 3/8, and then everything else gets propolized shut. If you're in an area that you always fight with yellow jackets or with a lot of robbing, isn't this the cutest little thing? They actually make robbing screens for nuke boxes. I mean, they think yeah, you can, there's a lot of money in beekeeping, it's ours. So again, I put it together so that it cranks it down to like 1 bee space coming and going, and I'll have all this up here, you guys can come up, touch, feel, don't take it home. One of the big things though is I want you to feel how heavy these are. The plus side too to making this flat black, I write on these, because when I'm out doing inspections, for me to be running, I usually do like 65 nukes going into winter. For me to have 65 little pages or something like that is crazy. It's easier for me just to write in the corner what happened or what's going on. And I write it in the color of that year. And then that way I can get 4 years worth of work on 1 lid, and that lid always stays on that hive. So you can just walk up and see what was going on last time. For those that don't graft, this is probably, Larry Connor helped me a whole lot starting out with queen rearing. This one was a real good one. Back when, trying to think, it was before COVID, I was on an airplane reading this one, and this was one of the books at the beginning that was banned because it said sex on it. So if you ever want to get, kicked off a plane or something, pull this one out. And the other one too is that Increase Essentials. These are all really good. You guys have so much talent right here in Michigan. Use it, use it. So again, there's a couple other ones up here. The Essentials, the Field Guide, and then the vocabulary one. I never realized sometimes when we talk to the public how much they really don't know. And we just rattle on, and then it turns out it's like, uh-oh, they had no idea, it just all went right over their head. Okay, so I'm going back to my side here. Are there any questions so far? Not yet? Okay, I'll confuse them better, don't worry. So anyway, so going on to, we just talked about make sure you have enough boxes. People go back and forth with me all the time about this full sun. When the bees go to a tree, do they pick one in the middle of the forest so it's nice and shaded? No. Full sun. It's easier for them to ventilate than it is for them to create heat. So again, dark boxes, every once in a while for mating purposes, I throw a white one in there so they can orientate back. That's another funny story. If we have time, I'll talk about that one. Fresh water. I know that's what we teach, but did you ever notice that when the bees are out drinking somewhere, they're like on the edge of the pond where it's murky. They're in the chicken crap water. They're, it's like, really? I just cleaned out the bird bath. It's so clean. No, we're not going to drink out of that. Let's go back to the barnyard. Again, make sure you feed sugar syrup. If you are feeding, again, you could do easily 40% sugar, 60% water, because what's nectar? 20/80? I mean, we want them to have more carbs than that, but if you need wax, 40% will do it. Pollen patty, don't go more than a half a patty because then you're feeding the small hive beetles. If they're in full sun, you're gonna find they'll get corralled a lot better. If they're in the shade, it's too hard for the bees to keep up with it. Small entrance to protect, so everybody's got a bottom one, and then on the inner covers, the hole is always facing down. On this group, because they're so condensed, this one face is going that way, this one faces out. Mouse guard, gotta have that. When you run as many hives as I do, I can't afford to buy all those fancy mouse guards. I use 1/2-inch hardware cloth, fold it in half, shove it in there, and then come spring, usually I do not take my mouse guards off until the 1st of April. It's gotta be warm enough and enough population for them to keep the mice out. And then I pull them all out, throw them in a bucket, and then they're already ready for next year. Ventilation, I can't express that enough. Bottom, top, these are all solids. If you're gonna do the slide, how many people are running screen bottom boards? Yeah, that was, when I first started, everything was solid. And then that was the new thing, is to try to do screen ones. And did you ever notice sometimes they propolize the screen shut? And so it's obvious they don't like that. But again, it's that human thing, oh, we know better. No, we don't. If you're gonna winter them, put them on boards or bricks, don't put them on ground. These you'll see, as the older I get, the closer to the ground they get. I don't care about the skunks and the raccoons and the possums. We also have Dobermans. And my Sarah just loves to bring me trophies. She won't explain how she can bring me a half a skunk. I wanna know where the other half is other, and how come this doesn't smell? Yeah, it's like, surprise. But anyway, so as I get older, mine are getting lower and on the ground. This is about 8 inches of pea gravel. This is about 4 to 5 inches of pea gravel on 57s. So again, there's good drainage, that's your big thing. You'll also find out too that nothing really can grow in it because it's just all gravel. So again, learn from my mistakes and save your, cut that learning curve a little bit. People always ask me too, for an overwintered nuke, how much weight do you have to have? Where's Megan? At one time, she said about 25 to 30 pounds, and I like, vapor lock. I like mine to be at 40. I want those double nukes. I don't want you to be able to move them. Sometimes they'll get stuck out in the field because I was late getting them picked up. In a double one like that, one, you can't get them apart, and then two, you can't lift it, and the guys will come over, oh, I'll pick it up for you. Yeah, try. No, doesn't have it. They live in the field where they're at. Be prepared though, just in case if you're light, you're gonna have to feed. I would prefer to put a little box of capped honey on it. Not so much because it's capped honey, but because the heat will be absorbed in honey and it'll help retain that, and then at night will radiate it back out. So it's kind of like an insulation kind of thing. But the candy board, these are candy boards. I use the Danny Slaba recipe one. The reason they're darker is because I put buckwheat honey in them, because that's supposed to be healthier for you, and I don't like it because it tastes terrible. So I feed it to the bees and it looks better. Make sure that one, you do this when your family is not home. Two, make sure you put wax paper on the counters, And then 3, this is the little shim that I just showed you, has a hole in it. I also put a 1-pound honey jar in there. And that way when I pour it in there and it hardens, I keep moving the jar. That then becomes their upper entrance. Okay, because then your inner cover is gonna go on the top of, above this. The nice thing too about candy boards or blocks of candy is it's twofold. One, it's supplying food for them, and 2, it's absorbing the extra moisture. Believe it or not, these little guys will produce a lot of moisture. And so the candy board will help absorb some of that. I had, are you a rapper? And my husband made me take that out. He said that's what's kind of hokey. So I just changed it to just wrapping. Again, you gotta have mouse guards, some type of an insulating inner cover. For clubs, what I tell them is get that 4x8 sheet, get the electric knife, draw a line on it, it cuts right through it, and then have the club split the cost up and sell it like as a club project or something. Because if you don't have a lot of crazy hives like me, you're only gonna need a couple, right? I like that 2-inch pink foam. Makes a really good insulation. When you take it off in the spring, put it somewhere where nothing can chew on it. So put it in the barn, not where critters can get it. Roofing paper always works really good. Get the heavy felt one. You'll cut it like 72 inches long, fold it up. You can save it for, I can get about 4 years out of one wrapping. The styrofoam board, if you notice this, first, look what color. Okay, second, the board only goes around 3 sides. The reason for that is that if the sun is out, are they gonna get any solar gain? Not if you've got foam board all around it. The second thing is that it keeps the cluster to the back. So that when the skunks or if anybody does come around scratching at the front, they think twice about having to break cluster to go see who's there. Keeps them in the back of it. Usually I have a little piece of string that I tie around that so it doesn't blow around. Obviously here this, I just had stuff leaned against it. If push comes to shove, this one was on the dock that's over a 15-foot deep pond, so there was like no windbreak, nothing for that poor little stinker. And I felt really bad, so I gave it a cardboard box. Notice the upper entrance, the bottom was already snowed from on the dock. It came through fine. Again, just 2 deeps, nothing extra. The bead coat, or the cardboard box, I already talked about that, that's what that looks like. Get the one that's the, not the comfort fit. You want the neck, yeah, believe it or not, they come in 2 sizes. Yeah, cardboard box, really? I would think maybe my pants, not the cardboard. But anyway, but get the one, not the comfort fit one. And you can bump the 2 together and the box slides right over it. It's gonna produce just some dead air space, which is nice. If you do the bee cozies, anybody using bee cozies still? Do they still sell them? Okay. Do not put a plastic bag over the top of it. You're not helping. All you're doing is really collecting the moisture and causing big mold problems on top of the dead bees in the spring. So make sure the top and the bottom are left open. And again, the black wax ones, I think it's Van Lake, and get the one for doubles. These guys are wrapped in the felt paper. You see the cardboard box here. And we're going to talk about windbreaks here in a minute. Cold is okay. Remember what, I don't know, maybe 8-9 years ago when we had that like week of -18? I did not lose 1 hive that year. It was phenomenal, and I kept thinking, oh, they're gonna die. The cold doesn't kill them, it's the wet. And so make sure that, you know, keep the ventilation so that they don't get wet. The winds also are a tough one, those north winds coming out. If it's constantly wicking against them, it's hard for the bees. All right, so you can do, this is just the, what is that? Burlap, yeah. This sounded like a really good idea, but down by me, we have a lot of deer, and they try to jump it. They could walk around it. No, let's try to jump it. So they tore it up all the time, so that wasn't such a good idea. But it does create enough of a windbreak. This I swiped off the internet just because I thought it was kind of pretty. But if you're gonna do the hay bales, put them in black plastic bags, because the sleet and the snow and all that, as you get into spring, you're gonna get mold, and you don't need that pressure against the hive, because then you're gonna get mold in your hive too. But it does look pretty cool, doesn't it? Could be like a little bee maze. Windbreaks can be anything. For your overwintered nukes, we're on 10 acres. We have like 100 feet of grapes. So these are those styrene ones. I really like those. But apparently the skunks and the raccoons like to chew on them. So apparently they like them too. They're like little coolers though, and once they set up in there, perfect. I mean, they overwinter, I would say 100% out of, I'd say at least 4 out of 5 years, I'll get 100% that'll come through with those. Again, straw bales and plastic. If you get a push, you can do patio cushions. The burlap drape, I told you have to watch with the deer snowdrifts. You can see I used to go out and like dig them out. It's like, so then I just put a 2x12 down and forgot that. This was just a piece that blew off the roof of the barn. And in my opinion, finders keepers, I found it first. It was beekeeping. It took my husband like a week before he was out checking for damage. And he goes, there's a whole piece blown off. I said, no way. I was just shocked. He didn't figure it out until spring and he had already replaced the place. He goes, hey, is that off the barn? I said, no, I said, everything's up there. I don't see any mold. So you gotta be really quick with these guys. This is a piece that came off of the greenhouse. It's that double plastic with the channels. We had some wind damage. It blew a branch and made a hole in it. So he was gonna throw it away and I got that one too. So again, just put it up on the side. These were overwintered nukes. It was a pretty bad snowy year that year. This is north, so the wind was blowing this way. And so they were stacked up on the backside and then like a foot in front were some production hives. So back to the sharing heat. Everybody got that concept? You can buy these boxes with this wooden divider in them. So there's going to be less space for them to transfer heat. And this comes all the way to the top. So the next box fits right on there so that the main thing is you can't let that queen go back and forth. Because there's always that one that has she's a little more dominant than the other. She's trying to always get to the other side. You have to be very careful with that when you do a system like this. When you run this one here, there's a box, she's not getting past that. But again, you want them to share the common wall. You're still gonna maybe think about wrapping or styrofoam, something like that. Again, the common wall is always gonna be the capped honey, then you're gonna have your brood, and then the outside one is going to be capped honey. When I first started doing this, Mike Palmer helped me a lot, but he runs 4/4, which is kind of nice, but if you're running 10 frame equipment, okay, how many frames have you got? You only have 8. So what do you do for the other 2? So that's why I kind of also went to the 5/5, because then if you're running 10 frames, boom, you're up and running, bless you. So anyway, here's some pictures. Again, I tried doing it this way, where I just put everybody next to each other. I can get them to go through winter with 1 deep. And notice there's not a honey super box on top. All right, every once in a while, like I said, we throw in some color, just because when they're mating, they want them to get home to the right place. These are doubles put together, and then I put their 2 little lids on another one because I thought there was water getting down in between them. There wasn't, and they didn't care anyway. We did this one year where they just built up like crazy, and so I just cut styrofoam paneling with the shiny side goes inside, and you do have to put a little string on them. But this is crazy how they go in. This was also pre-solid board. The problem that I had here is that when they got this high, they're a little more top heavy, and if they are not on a solid shared board, one can go one way and then dominoes. Yeah, that could be a problem. So when you have that double bottom board, even if they are heavy, they're not gonna flip everybody. So that's why I really kind of advocate using that solid bottom. The other thing too is look and see where some of this is being melted. That's an insulation issue, okay? You don't want, on some of them you're gonna see, especially on pictures coming up, that snow's not melting at all. That tells me that I insulated the top correctly, all right? Cause let's go cover that now too. All my hives are all tipped ½ inch forward. I used to be really diligent, and in September when I fed pollen patty and put my mouse guard on, I tipped everybody ½ inch forward so that during condensation, it would run down the front, out the front door. If they are level and you get condensation, where does it go? It rains right down on the bees, wet bees, dead bees, right? If they are off balance and they're tipped back, it'll run down to the back, and where does it go? It stays there, because there is no way for it to get out, so then you have the fall, the freeze and thaw, and all that moisture just keeps building up. So tip them ½ inch forward. Now everybody is ½ inch forward, and the bees don't care. I haven't gone in and checked to see if it's a 17 degrees still, because it might be off a little. They haven't said anything. I asked them to leave me a sticky note, and they're just not cooperating. Here's the patio cushions. It's pretty crazy. You can see this is the field, this is north wind. Again, they're on gravel, so for drainage. This was the little test hive, the assay for this that winter was, can you do that instead of an inner cover? And again, the bees don't care, they probabilized it just the same, so it was just disgusting and threw it away in the spring. They don't even, I don't think they do these much anymore, the overboards. You ever see those anymore? No, I can tell by that look, never mind. Okay, so that was, this whole row was production hives. So you see they went in 2 deeps, inner cover, feed box in case I had to feed, 2 deeps, inner cover. This was 2 deeps with double nukes above it with an overboard, and I wrapped everything, and then 2 deeps, overboard, 2 nukes, and I wrapped the bottom ones, left the top ones open. 2 deeps, double nukes, didn't wrap anybody. 2 deeps, a feed box, 1 nuke, and wrapped it. Everybody lived, so it wasn't really much of a project, but it was interesting, it looked good. Kept me out of trouble. Here's the picture of it in the winter. And again, I tell people, you wanna see dead bees in the snow. That means housekeeping is working. That means your hive is alive. You don't have to go check them other than check from the back, make sure they're keeping weight. They're not eating too much. And again, like I said, everybody survived, so that didn't help. So anyway, thinking about feeding. I already talked about this Danny Slava. That sometimes too is a nice club activity. This makes it's 35 pounds of sugar. You know, and if you only have like couple of hives, what are you gonna do with all those candy blocks? So again, do this. I usually do it at my house the Sunday after Thanksgiving, because my husband goes to someone else's house for football. And we take over the kitchen, we have it all cleaned up, and he goes, oh, I thought you were having people over. Nope, we're done. So again, make those. You can also feed that Pro Sweet, because it's already inverted. You don't have to worry about any gastric issues. I usually either use little sticks or glue, if you have little kids, 3 popsicle sticks glued together is perfect bee space, and then it's reusable. Here's pictures of those candy blocks like this, but you can't see real good, but on this frame, I have piano wire, so that as they're eating, those blocks don't fall down and crush the bees. You have to think about that too. But this is a nuke, and I think I cut it off. This was in January, and they were that high up already in the box. So you know when they move up, weight consuming too much. This, when you make extra, you can put in those cheap little bread pans that you get from like the dollar store. They're like 10 for $1. Line them with wax paper, and then pack them in. And like I said, we always make them the weekend after Thanksgiving, because it gives them plenty of time to harden off. Because if you set up right, they shouldn't need any feed probably till February. But it's better to have it in and drying before you need it. This is to feed like in July or August, that you can set up these boards with the holes in them and then feed them all at once. And this is when I first set them up in July with their new little queen cell. They'll spread around, but just watch if you have small hive beetle, because then you're just feeding them. The overboards, I guess you guys don't have those now. The big problem with those is you're gonna put them over double deeps to go into winter. There's a problem with moisture, because that big hive is producing a lot of heat, which is perfect for the little nukes, right? But they're also producing a lot of metabolic moisture, so it's a little harder for that nuke to process that. So just kind of keep an eye on that. Again, this was a double deep, the overboard, and then 2 nukes. See how this is melting and dripping? That tells me that there's too much heat in there for that little nuke to fight with, okay? So the styrene hives, I talked about those a little bit. Same startup as with these. They can be bought with feeders on top. They hold about a gallon of liquid feed. That's kind of nice, you don't have to go back in there. These are all, I put mine in with 2 deep, so they start out looking like this. I do ratchet those because they're out in the field, and sometimes the deer will come around with their little antlers and knock stuff over. But then, you know, this is after like 1 snowfall, and it was up like covered 1 deep all completely. So they're on their 2nd deep in the feed box. The big thing with that, no matter how much you want to take a peek, do not open it, because you're gonna let that warm air out, and no matter how quick you close it, now there's cold air in there, and it's like a cooler. It's just stuck in there, and it's a little bit harder than for the bees, because they can't heat the ambient air to raise that temperature. It's kind of cold. So it doesn't matter what anybody tells you, no, you can't look. The big thing is you wanna check your overwintered nukes often. I tell people to start from the back and just kind of see if you can lift the back of the box. Going by October, you should not, actually sometimes by September, you can't even lift them, they're too heavy. And so if you know, like, you know, every week, every 2 weeks, you know, once you start where you can start moving them a little bit, then you're gonna carefully lift the lid, not the inner cover or anything, and see where the bees are. If they're up at that inner cover hole, then it's time you're gonna have to do something. Does that make sense? Don't wait. And again, we talked about the candy boards. You can do the camp sugar where you just pour sugar around the inner cover hole. I spritz it if I have to do that, if it's out in one of the out yards. Because you can put a 10-pound bag of sugar in a backpack and walk out there because you can't drive anymore. But those, I always try to leave a super of honey on them because it's better insurance. Again, capped honey is always better. 1, because it insulates them, and 2, they use some of that extra water to dilute the honey to eat it. So December, now we're gonna talk about the timing and the care.